yes, so the floor is yours whenever you want.
Okay. So hello everybody. I'm really happy to be here for now. And before starting, I would like to briefly introduce myself, though some of you may already know me. I am Zeynep CEYHAN BİNGÖL, and I have been teaching English for 10 years, and I am a language instructor in higher education since 2016. And I am a GE research team member here, and I am really happy about it. And I'm really excited to be here and work with those awesome people. And thank you for all your help and excellent work. Now I would like to present my study called the EFL Instructors, the EFL Instructors Perceptions and Practices on Standard English and Global English in a Turkish Context. So here the title. Before starting, I would like to explain why has English spread and become a global language. Because it is an official second or foreign language in many countries. Therefore, the number of people speaking English has increased with 5 times more non-native speakers worldwide. Also, English is the language of many fields such as science, business, education, entertainment, the internet, and even daily life. When we use the internet, we hear or see, or when we go to a restaurant or cafe, we speak English. And even the coffee names are also in English, even in Turkey. So we can say English is everywhere around the world. And here we can say we have more than 2 billion people speaking English around the world, and this is a, let's say, a very good number. So if we focus on why English has spread so much, we can focus on the British Empire and its colonization process. Because of the colonization, people started to use English in their mother tongue or second language. And also we can focus on technology and science. Because of technology and science, and it is, let's say, wide use of English. English has been started to use by lots of people. And when you focus on the USA, we can think about Hollywood, the politics, and we can say education, music, etc. So its power also affected the use of English. And also we can talk about the snowball effect, which I mean here is when we say the snowball effect, we can say that because of using the internet everywhere, it started to be used more and more every day. And the most important point here, why did I deal with the issue? I mean, how did I decide to study on it? As an English teacher, I have always thought that it is unrealistic to hope our students should be native-like or they should speak like native speakers. And the most significant point in language learning is to be able to communicate. And I have wanted to do something about it to help my students who are generally not eager to speak English in classes. And I also aim to help ourselves as teachers by sharing our ideas and gaining new perspectives. So when we say standard English and global English, it is not clear if you are not, let's say, researching about the topics. So I first would like to give the main concept here. The first concept is standard English. And we can say standard English is a particular dialect of English, being the only non-localized dialect, a global currency without significant variation, universally accepted as the appropriate educational target in teaching English, which may be spoken with an unrestricted choice of an accent. And although standard English is not a language, it may be the most important English variety of all because it is used in writing, printing, and education systems around the world. And it could still be the most dominant variety of English, having an important role in language teaching. However, as you know, the world is changing. Despite its dominance, it is less influential as the language itself develops. It might also be inappropriate in global situations because nowadays we are dealing with multicultural, multilingual students, and when we focus on the realities around the world, it might become a story when people from different backgrounds use English to communicate. And we can say English has become a global language, a lingua franca, or an international language in the changing world. Nearly half of the people in the world will be speaking English before 2050, and people live and work in international, multilingual, and multicultural environments. So the inner circle variety of English may be irrelevant, which led us to focusing on global Englishes. So we can say, if we focus on what global English is, global Englishes extend the length of these fields to incorporate many peripheral issues associated with English, such as globalization, linguistic imperialism, education and language policy and planning. And if we focus on global Englishes, we can say we have witnessed a shift in usage of English. And from being the language of small minority of native English speakers to one with a global ownership, today English functions as a lingua franca among people from diverse linguo-cultural backgrounds, the majority of whom are adding to their multilingual repertoire. It is used for various purposes in diverse settings and in hybrid ways, where speakers draw on their other languages to communicate successfully. So by focusing on the world, we can say now there's a need for some changes in the, let's say, ELT field, okay? And the global status of English has caused a need to change some perspectives in ELT. And Galloway and Rose suggest that those perspectives might be altered by increasing world Englishes and ELT in curricula, respecting multilingualism, raising awareness of global Englishes, raising awareness of English as a lingua franca strategies, focusing on diverse cultures and identities more, and changing English hiring practices. In a nutshell, there is a need for a language teaching pedagogy which is beyond the idea of being native-like to give more realistic and up-to-date education for language learners. Okay, sorry, I have changed the computer so I cannot control it easily. So when we focus on my study, I can say, despite the changes and new approaches in the ELT field, language teachers might need more information about reality for different reasons. They may not have enough time or they may not have enough resources to, let's say, follow new trends, or maybe some psychological, economical reasons. We can't go on like that. Or they just might be unwilling or resistant to change due to their normative views about speaking. However, no matter what they think, language teachers' perceptions are essential in ELT because their ideas shape their in-class activities. Therefore, they should be open-minded and innovative to meet their students' communication needs in that global era. And in my study, I examined how English language instructors perceive standard English and global Englishes. Additionally, I aim to elicit how these issues were practiced in the ELT context. And why is it important to focus on it? Since non-native speakers have outnumbered native speakers and people use English in many fields, English is everywhere. Therefore, this study includes perceptions of the instructors in addition to their natural classroom practices, so it is authentic and provides rich input in terms of practices, and it investigates the consistency between their views and their practices. In this respect, it is significant and could be an initiative to fill the gaps in the field by combining and comparing the instructors' perceptions with their classroom practices in the Turkish context. So here you can see my research questions. I can give you some, let's say, time to read. And also, if you are connecting from the phone or etc., I can read it. The first question is, what are the perceptions of the English language instructors on standard English and global Englishes? The second one is, how are standard Englishes and global Englishes practiced in the non-native English language instructors' classrooms? And the last question is there any consistency between the English language instructors' perspectives and their in-class practices? And it is a mixed method study comprising qualitative and quantitative data to obtain more detailed information. And it's a sequential explanatory design because it is conducted by collecting quantitative data first and qualitative data as the second process. I tried to make a short summary of the research context here. In short, I can say the study was conducted at the preparatory school of a private university in Mersin, and there were 48 language instructors in the school, including both natives and non-natives. And the participants were chosen based on convenience sampling because the participants were the most available and volunteer ones. And here you can see my data collection tools. And I collected the data through a questionnaire, and the questionnaire had primarily open-ended questions and classroom observations and semi-structured interviews. Therefore, triangulation was achieved in the study. So, as I said before, I had two phases in the study. The first one is about collecting quantitative data. As you can see here, first I collected the data and it gave me the numerical data. And then I analyzed them and it led me to the second phase, which is related to the qualitative data. And in the second phase, I conducted classroom observations and semi-structured interviews with the 6 participants. And those participants were non-native speakers of English because of the volunteerism issue. And while analyzing the qualitative data, I utilized thematic analysis. And at the end of the study, I combined both data and interpreted them. So, if we focus on findings and discussion, here we have asked why they teach English to their students, and the participants mentioned that they teach English to motivate their students to communicate with people from different cultures. So here an excerpt from the interview. One of my colleagues said they will join in programs like Erasmus. For example, they will participate in different platforms, meet people from the world. So I mean, they speak English with these people, so they hear different accents, they hear different cultural sentences from these people. So they will not hear just American English. I mean, the places, the things they did, even if they think differently now, and they will understand the situation is not so. I mean, Sorry, I cannot control. So we can say the participants aims to teach English mainly focusing on communication reflects the idea of Prodomo that mentions English as a lingua franca enables people to communicate from all over the world in their own context. And the participants' wish to teach English is in line with Crystal, mentioning English is a language for different areas in life, such as education, business, science, entertainment, music, and the internet. And shortly for that finding, we can say that the instructor's objectives to teach English might reflect that the lingua franca and global status of English, and it is used by people coming from different language and cultural backgrounds, have started to substitute norm-based approaches in English teaching. Another finding about standard English showed that most participants pointed out that standard English is the English of inner circle countries, and a good number of instructors believe standard English is more prestigious in communication. Their ideas about the ownership of standard English is parallel with Kashru, explaining inner circle countries are shareholders of English language spoken as a first or mother language. We can say that the instructor's views on English and its belonging might indicate that English does not belong to only the US or UK, but it is embraced by other countries as well. Another finding shows that many of the participants prefer to use standard English, as you can see here the numbers, and continuously, more than half of the participants believe that people must learn standard English. And here I can share some ideas from some colleagues. One of them said, well, as English isn't my native language, so when I learned it, I learned standard English as well. So I try to teach standard English like British English. And teaching standard English, I would say it is useful for academic purposes like for writing, for passing exams. But I think we shouldn't just keep teaching standard English because students aren't machines. So they have to learn how to think more than how to just feed them with information that they just can deal in the exams through exam papers. And their preference to use and perceptions based on the necessity of learning standard English reflect the prestige and dominance of standard English. And the findings may be interpreted that standard English still has a crucial role in ELT in the Turkish context. And asking about their preference to use their own accent or having pronunciation mistakes, we can say that more than half of the participants were not bothered by their students' pronunciation mistakes and errors, and they were comfortable with their accents. Their comfortability with their accents and not focusing on students' pronunciation present that users should decide on their own pronunciation norms as long as it is intelligible. And it may be interpreted that language instructors have noticed the lingua franca and global status of English, so they focus on communication rather than being able to speak like native speakers. And the findings also revealed that many participants prefer to use something other than their way of using English. Here you can see. They did not prefer to use their own idiolects. The instructors did not prefer to use English in their own way, which shows the prestige and dominance of standard English. However, only one standard model of English does not correspond to needs of learners today, since they communicate with their own cultures and identities in the global world. And for that finding, we can shortly say that it may be said that language instructors prefer to use standard English norms while speaking. And another finding about the instructors' perceptions of global Englishes revealed that many participants prefer to, I was looking at the other slide. They were satisfied with their own accent while speaking English. And they also pointed out that English language learners should be familiar with different uses of English in various regions of the world. Their positive views about introducing English varieties are parallel with Matsuda, mentioning when students have limited information about different uses of English, they may face problems in potential future interactions. And it might be indicated that language instructors are aware of other varieties of English, and they tend to enable their students to be familiar with different uses of English. And we can say most of the participants believe that their students can use different varieties of English as long as they follow the principles of comprehensibility and intelligibility. And the findings based on using English idiolects is connected with the ideas that native speaker-based communication is unrealistic because of world language status of English in local and international contexts. And it seems language instructors move away from traditional native speaker norms to communication-focused language approaches. When we focus on the classroom practices of the 6 participants, they used real-life-based warm-ups in their classes. They did not correct grammar in speaking, and they only focused on pronunciation if it created a problem. And moreover, they encouraged their students to speak English, but they did not trigger them to speak like native speakers. And the materials in the class were based on various topics and the authentic use of language. And for their classroom practices, focusing on standard English and global Englishes, we can say that despite their preference to speak English with native norms, they did not prompt their students to speak English like natives. So the focus of their courses was mainly on communication. And here you can see some crucial points obtained through classroom observations. Only one of the instructors did not use standard English while speaking, and that instructor tried to speak like a native. But as you can see here, the other participants were speaking like native. And if we compare their perceptions and practices, we can say that their classroom practices also aligned with their views because they did not focus on pronunciation during class activities and used their dialect of English in speaking. However, they believed standard English is still more prestigious. So, what does the study tell us as a conclusion? We can say it is possible to state that English language instructors integrate global Englishes in their classes to meet their students' communication needs. And it might be reflected that standard English is still dominant though language instructors are familiar with globalization and it is reflection in language teaching and learning. Another conclusion is that it might be said that despite the importance given to the standard forms of English, language instructors include not only standard English but also global Englishes in their teaching. Another important point that although language instructors tend to use standard English while speaking, they have already been influenced by global English's approach in their ELT context. It may be concluded that language instructors are aware of the importance of communication in language teaching and language learning. Therefore, they tend to integrate global Englishes in their classes. It may also be reflected that language instructors have been able to change their attitudes from native-like proficiency towards being able to communicate in English. Their perceptions and classroom practices may be associated with post-normative approach of debate, whose purpose is to enable language teachers to practice their teaching according to the environment and context in which their students will communicate in English. So, this study implies that being aware of the global status of English language is important for language teachers, language instructors, to be well-equipped and innovative teachers that are knowledgeable about changes in ELT and responsive to various needs of language teachers to communicate effectively in different contexts. And integration of global English approach in language teaching and learning context leads to communication-based courses and enables language instructors to raise awareness of language learners about changes and differences in the world. It is significant for language instructors to be aware of changes in the world and accordingly various needs of language learners to communicate effectively in different contexts. And language instructors need to be self-aware, world English is aware, global English is aware, to be able to integrate those concepts in their classrooms. So there's a need for in-service training to raise awareness of those concepts. And here you can see some studies based on in-service teacher awareness about those concepts. And also, global English's awareness, health awareness, or world English's awareness should be integrated into the pre-service English teacher curriculum with several courses combining critical reflection, personal experiences, and reflective interactions to have more global English's aware language teachers and learners. And here you can see some, let's say, important studies related to pre-service English teacher and global English's awareness. So, as a recommendation for future studies, firstly, I can say that examining language instructors before and after a global English's aware treatment could be significant for ELT in studying their transformation. Secondly, this study was conducted with language instructors working at the prep school of a private university. So we cannot generalize their findings to all higher education contexts in Turkey. So it could be valuable to carry out long-term research, including many instructors working in different higher education institutions. Then the study was carried out with only language instructors, yet future researchers might study with stakeholders of language learners and other stakeholders in institutions to reflect their views. They may include the head teachers, language learners, and if they have researchers in their departments. And future studies might be carried out to investigate how the curriculum can be designed to integrate global English's perspective in language classes. As the last recommendation, I can say that the perceptions about assessment and testing concerning global Englishes might be examined to determine how teachers evaluate their students' proficiency and language skills from Global English's pedagogy. And here you can see my references used in the presentation. And if you're interested in the details of my study, here you can see my email address, and please do not hesitate to mail me. I generally answer in a day or 2 days at most. I am using my email actively. And before finishing my presentation, I would really like to thank you for the ELINET team. I mean, they were here to help me whenever I need, and they gave me the chance to present my study here. And also, I would like to thank Elif Hoca, our lead coordinator in GE research team. And she was so helpful and so encouraging while preparing my study. And she also enabled me to be here. So I am really happy to be presenting here. So now I will be welcoming your questions and comments.
All right, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Zeynep. So anybody has any questions for our presenter? Let's see. I have to monitor the chat as well. Anybody would like to start? Nobody, then I start. Okay, so again, this is a topic which is very close to what I'm doing as well, to what I'm researching as well. So I'm very interested in this. And did your study draw any conclusions on perhaps the kind of support that could be given to teachers who would wish to implement this kind of pedagogy? Like, did you think about, when you were drawing your conclusions, how can this be made easier for them to implement the pedagogy, perhaps?
Sorry, could you say it again?
Yeah, so basically
I
I was
mean,
wondering,
uh-huh,
yeah, about you mentioned, about curriculum design, what can be done in teacher training.
mhm.
What can be done to make it easier for teachers to do GE in class?
I think the first thing to do is to make them, let's say, knowledgeable about what is GE. I mean, nowadays, I'm talking about Turkish context. Some teachers do not try to follow the new trends, or they do not, let's say, they do not want to leave their old traditional, let's say, point of views. So they just stick to standard English. But I mean, if we give them some, let's say, seminars, webinars, or whatever, I mean, they can reach the information about global Englishes and related concepts. Maybe we can do some, let's say, changes in their mind. So I can say that shortly, maybe with some in-service training, we can raise their awareness about those issues. I mean, even if they don't want to use global Englishes, they need to be aware of the reality. I mean, they need to know that there is something like that around the world.
Right, that's great. Thank you. And I think we have a question in the chat. Yanis is asking, I'm sorry I'm late in joining the meeting, but what's the common obstacles of learning English with standard English?
Okay, standard English, I cannot say it's an obstacle, but I mean, we are living in different part of the world, and we have a different culture, and we have a different speaking system. So, as for the Turkish students, it is really, let's say, difficult to speak like natives. I mean, when you focus on th sounds, or I don't know, even if when you focus on verb s for simple present, they don't want to speak. I mean, those are lots of details for them. But if you just focus on their, let's say, sentences, and if you just focus on what they want to say without correcting their grammar and without correcting their pronunciation, they are more eager to speak. So I believe that while speaking, rather than just focusing on standard English forms, we can focus on the, let's say, comprehensibility and intelligibility. So we can, let's say, help our students to communicate in English.
All right.
I,
I
I
see.
cannot say it is an obstacle.
Right. I see Dr. Galloway has raised her hand.
Hi, everyone. Actually, I can see other questions in the chat, so why don't I go after? Let's go through the questions in the chat first. I just saw them coming in. Thanks, Paolo.
No worries. So yeah, we have a new question in the chat as well. How can we find a balance between standard English and global Englishes in assessment? That's a very interesting question, I can say.
Yeah, this is why I mean I have already suggested to conduct some research about it because as far as I know, it is difficult to evaluate ELF in writing or let's say in proper exams, but I think people are still focusing on creating an assessment for those, let's say, fields, those concepts. So I think if there is more research about them, then we can find a balancing way to use in assessment.
Right. Indeed, assessment is coming, is something that is emerging as something particularly big in my study as well, even bigger than what I originally assumed. So yeah, definitely this is not a question we are quite able to address properly right now, as far as I understand, and we will definitely need a lot more in this particular field. But I guess assessment, it seems to me not many people focus on assessment specifically.
Yeah, I think it is because of it is difficulty.
Right, we have something else in the chat. I don't know if you can see it from Dr. Galloway. Why I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on why is why GE? Why did you choose the term GE, and what do you think of the use of GE as an umbrella term? A lot of work has been conducted in Turkey on ELF-aware pedagogy. Most seems to be focused on teacher training. Is GE a helpful way to bring scholars in the various fields together? I'm thinking about this myself.
I think G is a kind of umbrella term embracing all of them. I mean, rather than separating ELF, World Englishes, Standard Englishes, etc., it's a kind of umbrella term. So let's say I can re-evaluate my study because I also already studied about ELF, but after focusing on global Englishes and after learned some details about it, I think, yeah, it is a helpful way to bring scholars together and maybe to better understand the concepts, I can say.
I can also contribute at this point. Indeed, our journey started with ELF because there was no other term and World Englishes at that time. Maybe there was, I mean, Nicola's research became more and more widespread, I guess, and he Rose's research and terms. But in the beginning of our journey, we started with ELF in the Turkish context, and it was helpful as a term. But when we delved into the concept, it became bigger and bigger, broader and broader, and more intense. And we really looked for a term which would cover ELF, World Englishes, English as an international communication. I mean, these terms and concepts. And I think, Nicola, your work really has contributed greatly to our research through the concepts you suggested, because we also discussed with Zeynep throughout the preparation the right terms to use. Because in my mind, for example, when I was a novice beginner, World Englishes was to me the global Englishes today, okay? Because world means globe, and I didn't have an idea about the Indian, about the very fact that it referred to outer circle Englishes in people's minds. But then by reading and reading, that became clear to me. And there was really a gap in the literature about an umbrella term. So your suggestion was useful for us.
Right.
I was trying to unmute there. Sorry, I was looking to see where my unmute was. Sorry. Thank you. Thanks for that. And Zay, thank you so much for such a fabulous, well presented research study. I think that one of the questions to you was, how can we influence change? And your answer was by raising awareness. And I think that these very seminars have that purpose, that just it provides a place where we can talk about these things. And I really hope that the network will allow us to do that. And I asked that question there because this week I'm writing about the definition of global Englishes and looking at the history of the term. And Henry Whittleson, last November, I have the quote here, I was just looking to put in the chat. He's also questioned the use of global Englishes because, and I'm starting to wonder now, is it a useful term? Because I think the idea as an umbrella paradigm to bring the various paradigms together was definitely introduced to help instigate change in English language teaching and look at the similar calls being made in the different research paradigms. But I just wonder if Whittleson does have a point that the use of the term Englishes maybe implies also a world English focus on identifying varieties of English with boundaries. And yes, so
well, not necessarily. I mean, of course, it implies a plurality, but it's not necessarily a national-based plurality. And that's, I don't really think there is something that can be done with the term itself. It's the definition that, the definition, it should be obvious that it's not nation-based. Perhaps it should be made more obvious. But apart from that, I do not agree that the pluralization of English is a problem. If anything, I think that's the best part of the term, that English is, in my opinion. And I don't know if I'm speaking out of place, but in my experience, any term that one can come up with, or somebody will say something. I learned this as English as an international language. Then I discovered, the term international was problematic. So we call it English as a lingua franca. And that's how I called it in my dissertation. When I discovered global English is, I understood the meaning of the term. Was like, okay, yes, this makes sense. But I'm not changing again. But I understood the sense, and I definitely agree with the umbrella term. There are actually some ELF researchers which use ELF as an umbrella term. I don't know how effective is that, but I know it exists.
But the term global plus Englishes really helped us to, use a comprehensive term to refer to the reality in the world today. Because when you say, for example, ELF, ELF, then even if you don't have the intention, you may otherize world English speakers. But you don't have this intention. You just, want to embrace all Englishes in your heart and mind. So we were in search of a term, I guess, and this helped us a lot. But still, still ELF would exist and World Englishes would exist in this reality of global Englishes, I guess, because when Nicola, when you define global Englishes, you refer to these terms as well, right? They will have their own right in the context of global Englishes, I guess.
Yeah, it had a very inclusionary agenda to include the research in the different paradigms.
Mm-hmm.
So, Zeynep, where next with your research findings?
Sorry?
Where next? What's your next step with this study?
Can I be honest? I mean, I'm really interested in global Englishes, and but nowadays I am also focusing on my PhD, and also I am writing my thesis with a baby. So nowadays I am focusing on translanguaging as well. But I mean, when I organize my life better, I also would like to, let's say, follow some projects about the issue, because I know in the Turkey we have a lot of people focusing on global Englishes, and I know, I mean, some of them are really hardworking people, and maybe if we can deal with this, we can really make a study focusing on the, let's say, all different regions in Turkey, for example, or maybe different contexts in Turkey. And I'm sure it will be really helpful to increase awareness of global Englishes around the world and also in Turkey. Yeah, and also I really would like to see English, I mean, global English aware teachers in classes. So I would like to continue with practices as well. I mean, being aware just does not mean that those teachers utilize global Englishes in their classes. I mean, also we need to focus on the practice part, and maybe we can, let's say, organize some projects based on classroom practices as well.
Mm-hmm.
For pre-service teachers and also for in-service teachers.
We always talk about this with
Mhm.
Zeynep and my dear colleagues from the ELNET Geo Research team. We would really like to conduct a comprehensive international project to raise more and more GE-aware teachers. And you suggested Germany, Thailand. Why not? We can really have collaborations on these issues, raising more and more English major students and also pre-service and in-service teachers who are globally aware.
Yeah, I think now that we've set up the network, it took us years to get to this stage, and Paolo's done a fabulous job with the seminar series, and Elif, you've really led the Turkey team, the GE research team, and I can really see things starting to come together. We're looking now at publications and projects across the network. So it's really an exciting time, and we really thank the Turkish team for all of your efforts as well. I'm sure Paolo would agree, particularly with the seminar series.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
definitely.
Thank you so much. It's our great pleasure, and we are here because of you. Thank you so much for your leading role in ELNET, for pioneering this great organization. Thank you.
Lovely to meet you, Zeynep.
Right. Anybody else has something for our presenter? If not, then we can call this. And yeah, thank you again, Zeynep, for everything. It's been a wonderful presentation, and yeah, I'm looking forward to see you all at our next seminar, which I think is going to be on the 14th of September. It is going to be our very own Nadia presenting her research. So yeah, we will send you the invitation soon. But until then, have a good day, everyone, and I hope to see you next time.
Thank you for everything. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Zeynep.